All right. So moving back to stuff. Where did we leave off? What were we talking about when we last left? As I
Uh, we finished with the yin affirmations. Everyone just finished going through all of it.
All right, very cool. All right. So the next, like, I think I've covered a lot of the money stuff. Well, there is one exercise that I think might be fun for us, but um, I'm gonna walk through it. We're not gonna do it, but I want to walk through it so you guys can do this on your own time. Because I think now that you've gotten this idea of why yin formations are so powerful, we can take it one more level and apply it to logical levels and use the logical levels process. And now we can begin to in modern in both Eastern and Western practices, there is this this concept called equilibration of the elements. And what this means is um, based on your understanding of emotions and their correspondences to the various prime principles of fire, earth, metal, water, wood, you create an inventory of your positive traits and your negative traits as they pertain to each of the elements. So, just as an example, if we're talking about purifying the fire element within ourselves, fire on its in its positive polarity, in its positive dimension, is creativity, transformation, light, heat. Um, in terms of emotions, it's joyfulness, it's courage, it's creativity. And so we would actively seek ways to amplify those traits within ourselves. The inverse aspect of the fire element is rage, hatred, um, jealousy. Actually, is kind of it. And so um, the desire to destroy. These are negative aspects of the fire element. And so what we would do as alchemists is we would seek the path of transmutation, where we take these negative fire elements, which in this case we're talking about emotions, and transmute them into its positive polarity. That process is part one of what we call equilibration of the elements. And then from that point on, and you would do that for each of the elements: fire, earth, metal, water, wood. If it's Chinese, fire, air, earth, water, void, or akasha. If you're in the more the European traditions, the next part of that equilibration of the elements would be to balance the elements in relation to each other. So ideally, you want your fire to be balanced by your water and your and wood and earth, and have them all harmonious. You see how it works? You balance the elements within themselves, and then you balance the elements amongst each other. That's the end goal. And there's both a direct uh, impact on this in terms of the substance of what you're working with, as well as the subjective experience of what you're working with. Because as you develop and harmonize and cleanse and evolve the elemental aspects, and the elemental aspects actually evolve the astral part of you. And that's why we're not going to spend a lot of time on that part of it in this training. It's not directly germane to the work we want to do, which is far more practical. And when I mean practical, I mean things we can put into practice right away and start to generate an immediate result. But ultimately, elemental work is all about purifying and stimulating the astral body, so that it actually, when you drop this physical body, your spirit actually moves to the astral plane and it lives in its astral body. And the vibration, the aggregate vibration of your astral body, that's where you rise to within the astral plane. So if you've developed your astral body very, very highly, you're vibrating at a very, very high level, when you drop the physical body, your astral body rises to that vibrational plane within the astral, and you live there, you exist there for however long it takes the astral body to go through its life cycle. Because the astral body is technically not immortal either. It's the spiritual body, the mental body. That is the spirit, that is the immortal side of you. But the idea, and this is one of the reasons when you look at Buddhist iconography, and you look at the different deities, like, you know, Fudo Mayo and Kuan Yin and the Taras, the various Taras in the Buddhist traditions. These are not gods as we understand them. From a moral perspective, they might be. They're more like bodhisattvas, but they're also symbolic of a certain level of consciousness, a certain vibrational frequency range. And so by meditating on these icons with the intention of identifying with them, those icons become a channel to that vibrational plane. And so as a byproduct of getting in rapport and identifying with those icons, you take on those attributes and your vibration raises. You see how it works? Sounds an awful lot like what we do to get rapport with people, doesn't it? It's exactly the same. Exactly the same, right? So that level of training and that approach, and it doesn't really matter what iconography or symbolics you use, the process, the mechanics are the same. Whether you're doing Greek gods or Roman gods, the Judeo-Christian, Mother, Father, or Father, Holy Son, Holy Ghost, Mother Mary, it doesn't matter. The iconography are the links between those vibrational intelligences and you. So whether you use established iconography or you develop your own personal symbology, it works the same way. Okay. Now that I've spent like 10 minutes talking about that, we're not going to do that. But I wanted you to understand that those things are designed to raise the vibration of not just your physical body, but your astral and mental bodies as well. Okay. And because it's not directly relevant to manifesting, it's indirectly relevant to manifesting, because the more advanced and developed your astral body, the faster you can manifest really cool shit. Okay. But it's long term. So we want something that's a little bit more immediate. And so we're doing other practices. But there is a long-term benefit to doing these things short-term. What we're going to start talking about now is balancing your beliefs, equilibration of your beliefs, by combining yin formations and logical levels. And we're going to take a similar approach to looking at logical levels in terms of positives and negatives, right? And so we're not going to do it because it's going to take too long. But if this is something that you would like, if you don't have enough tools yet to uncover shit, right? This is going to give you yet another layer. Okay. So let me pull up my chart really quick here. I just need my my logical levels chart. Here we go. All righty. It looks so small. Oops. So this should be in several places in your manuals. It's also in the I think it's also in the Strategic Serendipity manual. So everybody's belief system, and by the way, this particular classification of the hierarchy of beliefs did not originate in NLP, although it's most commonly affiliated with NLP. It was actually developed by one of the people who were one of the sources for NLP, Gregory Bateson. He actually, I think, is the one who created these logical levels. And I think Dilts was the one who added the spirituality purpose aspect. But the way that this works is you create, hold on, let me annotate. When you want to outline beliefs, or you want to uncover beliefs, you want to divide this hierarchy of beliefs into positive beliefs and negative beliefs. Okay, and you want to use the information process to unlock these. Now, keep in mind that when you start applying this, you may dredge up beliefs that you didn't know you had, that are buried really, really deep. But either way, one set of questions or one set of informations is going to dredge up negative potential negatives. Another one is going to dredge up potential positives. And ideally, you can use one to nullify the other, or when you elicit these, you can use any of the techniques that you've learned up to this point to go in and nuke them. So you can color breathe them, you can spin them, you can magic frame them. Either one will work. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Yes or yes? All right. So I'm going to give you just a couple quick examples, and then I'll let you go, and you can extrapolate on it. So when I'm creating my negative belief list, I might start. I like to start at the spiritual level, and I might ask myself, why does God not want me to be successful? And I'll pay attention to the answer I get, and I'll write that down. Right? Why does my life have no purpose? Right? These are questions at the higher level, or at the identity level. But then I can flip the script on that, and I can say, why does my life have purpose? You know, how can I make, you know, why does God want me to be successful? Right? And so I can elicit sets of beliefs, and again, using the STEM idea combined with the information process, I can start to create trees of beliefs and rationales that I can neutralize. I can go to the identity level and say, why am I not successful? Right? Or why am I, you know, why am I poor? Why am I a poor person? Right? Or why am I not as successful a person as I could be? I can flip the script and say, why am I a successful person? What is it about me that allows me to be so successful? Okay, I can look at the beliefs values. I say, what's important about not having what I want? What's important about not having what I want? I can flip the script and I can say, what's important about getting everything I want? Right? A really cool question I learned from my my colleague James C2, which actually elicits some really cool information, is, what am I not currently getting from the life I have? Or what am I currently not getting? That elicits even more powerful motivations and things like that. And all I really do is, I just go down each of these belief levels, and I ask the negative side, and then I ask the positive side. And I build on this, and I dissolve this using the techniques that I have. You see how it works? And so eventually you'll start coming up with things about your environment, about the behaviors that you're engaging in, about the capabilities you believe you have or don't have, and you can resolve them before they trip you up in the future. Does that make sense? You just back to Brady Bunch mode. Do you guys see how that works?
Yes.
Okay. Is this, I mean, we're not going to do it. Like this is again, another level to this if you want to continue to start to harmonize and balance things, right?
Yep.
Joseph?
David.
Yeah. Or yes, John or Joseph or whoever.
Yeah. David, so how do you just actually say, right, I'm going to ask the spiritual level and then ask the question to that? Is that how you elicit it?
Yeah. I mean, when I'm thinking about, you know, why did the universe decide to make me this way? You know, it goes to purpose or spirituality or belief systems, karmic destiny, those kinds of things. They're much higher than identity. Okay. But the idea of, again, this was another download I got the other night, and I wasn't exactly sure how to convey it or where to convey it in a way that kind of made it as a progression. But you guys have been through stems, you've been through the information process. We've talked about logical levels and how they interact with things. This is another way to kind of get clarity and to provoke, for lack of a better word, beliefs you didn't know you had. And in the process of transmuting one into the other, you become more integrated and synergistic in your approaches. Everything becomes more integrated. Just like when we brought up the pictures of the things we wanted to manifest, and we looked for the little icky feelings in the background and we cleaned those up, and when we went and plugged those in to our timeline, it went in with really a lot of smoothness and lack of resistance. This is another way that we can begin to remove the resistance or the friction from our various belief systems. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Like I said, we're not going to do it, but I got the download for a reason, so I'm throwing it out there. If and when I ever teach this class again, I'm sure it'll come out in a very even more refined way. But
oh, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So let's say you had an area of your life that was stuck, and then so you would use this framework, maybe starting at spiritual and working down to try to unwind those issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
You might ask, what purpose did God have in mind for putting me in this situation?
Okay.
And you're going to get a pretty profound answer. You may not like it, but it'll be profound, right?
Right.
And then, why did God put me here to suffer like this? These are spiritual level questions that go to purpose or karma, for lack of a better word. The next level is identity. Why am I so miserable? I'm a miserable person, right? Why am I so miserable? I have to kind of put the identity statement in there, either overtly or directly, and your neurology is going to give you an answer. But then you can flip the script and say, why am I a happy person? Right? And again, it's about insight. And once you gain those insights, you can choose what to do with them or about them.
Right. Okay.
But you don't need to do this. This is just an optional thing.
So David, you can use this also so you can once you find the negative belief, you can either zap it away or you can just elicit the opposite belief. So if you have somebody who isn't pro zap, like you're in a situation where you can't zap people directly because people call you a witch, that's bad. Then you can use this.
Yeah, and you can turn this into a color breathing exercise very, very quickly, right? So if you got something that says, why am I so miserable? All of a sudden, you're going to get a feeling. You're going to get a response. You're going to get a feeling, right? And this is why do I deserve to be successful and happy? You're going to get another feeling, and you can turn that into a color, and
I like that.
And that's a direct mirror of the Hermetic equilibration of the element process. You elicit negative emotion or feeling, and you generate a surplus of its opposite and use it to burn out the other polarity. Right? I didn't understand how to do that until I understood color breathing and the integration of mind and breath and body, and coordinated that with feeling. I didn't get how just doing that as a mental exercise could possibly work, because it's not just a mental exercise. It has to have mind, imagination, mind, in other words, mind, breath, and body to facilitate it. Okay. Or you could also go, you not even focus on the positive sides of the logical levels. If you elicit all those negative beliefs, you could simply ask, what would I like to be true instead? And then you're gonna generate an even more targeted resolution frequency that'll nuke those beliefs out of the window right away. Okay. Okay, so all right, you guys ready to get lucky? Okay. Are there any other questions people might have on this?
Yeah, I had a question.
Okay.
How often do you do these so-called clearing exercises, or this last one that's sort of like a reframe, going from one polarity to the other in daily practice, so like, for instance, meditation or manifestation? Or is this like sort of Band-Aid approach to like a problem?
Well, I think certain practices should be done every day, others as needed, and others on a semi-regular basis. This particular one can get pretty complex. And by the way, I don't think you'll ever run out of questions or answers to these questions. And so this is an ongoing self-exploration process, right?
Well, I do the image cycling on a regular basis. Well, I have to go back to what I had been, and I also do chakra meditation almost every day. So I'm just wondering if I should be incorporating these practices, or pretty much just looking to see what I need.
A lot of it really depends, Bruce, on how much time you want to devote to these practices. You know, if you are training to be a hermetic mage, and you had time to be cloistered in a temple 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you might do this every single day as part of your daily practices. And this is one of the reasons, why I said the fastest way to learn none of this is to try to learn all of it, because there's a lot, and these things take time. And so the fastest way to get the biggest bang for your buck is to focus on the practices that really resonate with you, that come easily to you, and give you the most pleasure to do. And then as you make your strengths unstoppable, circle back, grab another piece off the table, and work with it until, once again, it's unstoppable for you. Like I said, these are all radioactive Legos, and you can put them together in any sequence you want. I think it might be useful to do, I think the informations you might want to do every day or every other day, in terms of your timeline stuff, like where you create something you want, you plug it into your timeline. You can do that as needed or as you think so.
Speaking of timeline, I had a quick question about that. You can go back in time. It doesn't matter where you place your desire. Time is a construct, so linear time doesn't actually exist. So I could go back in time and basically create like a paradox with something I manifested when I was a child, and it has to be true today.
Yeah.
That's cool.
There is some evidence from remote viewers and remote influencers that you can influence the past and the future, for that matter. But what's really important is that you influence your perception of the events that happen, because that's all you really have. Once you experience an event, everything else is past tense. All you're relating to from that moment on is the recording you made. And so it can mean anything you want. It can be anything you want. And it's the recording you made of the experience that your autonomic nervous system orients on and determines your flight path into the future, not the actual event. This is why we can go back and reclaim soul fragments or fragments of consciousness from those traumatic containers that they're in, and their whole life changes spontaneously. Because there's a piece of your consciousness trapped in that thought form, and it's on like a little hamster wheel running on continuous loops. But there have been certain situations, like Brent Baum in his book Trauma School Earth, he talks about doing a drug intervention on somebody, where during the holographic memory process, he takes the person back to right before that very first drug experience, and has the older version warn the younger version not to do the drugs, that it's going to ruin his life and it's going to do all these horrible things. And when the guy comes out of the session, he looks at Brent and he goes, you know, I remember when that happened. And Brent goes, huh? Yeah, I remember being in my room high as a kite, and this guy came out of nowhere and told me not to do this shit because it would ruin my life. I thought I was just having a bad trip. Right? And I actually had that happen with one of my students. I didn't believe it. I always take these things with a grain of salt until it fucking happens to one of my people. You know?
Reminds me of another commentary talks about dimension jumping, jumping from one reality to the other by manifesting like something like what you're describing now.
Well, again, the things that you're alluding to are long-term results of the drills that you're working with here. There's a progression. This is actually, you bring up a good point. I didn't cover this earlier on. There's a progression. We talk about this more in the advanced vibrational influence classes, and sometimes in the Secrets of Internal Power class that's coming up in October, November. There's a progression of phenomenology in how we do this. When you first start working with a lot of the processes, especially when all we understood it from was a hypnotic standpoint, the phenomena you generate are purely subjective. And what I mean by that is, let's say we're working with the fire element, and I'm imagining being in the middle of a sea of flame. Flame and fire exists infinitely in every direction, and I'm at the center of that universe, and my body is made out of fire, and I'm thinking fiery thoughts, and I'm just becoming one with the fire element. And at first, all it is a purely subjective imagined experience. And then something interesting begins to happen, and this happens for everybody. The only thing I can't predict is when, but there are orders of progression. So the next thing that'll happen is, rather than just starting to imagine it, you'll actually start to feel a subjective sensation of warmth in your body. Well, if we take your temperature, there won't be any obvious thermal change, but you'll feel warmer inside. That's the next level. Then what will happen is you'll start to get deeper and more absorbed and in rapport with that fire element. More and more of those qualities will come through into you, and you'll start to resonate with that frequency more. And and all of a sudden your body will start to warm up. There will actually be a subjective temperature change in your body. Then eventually what happens is you'll start to get deeper and deeper into that fire element, and after a certain amount of time meditating in a room, the room itself will become subjectively or objectively warmer, to be able to actually measure a change in temperature. Right? Some of you can leapfrog through those levels really quick, some take a while, but it all goes back to the level of absorption you have in the experience. Okay, but that's how it works. It starts with a purely, and this is also true with Qigong, although nobody tells you that. And if they told you this from the beginning, you wouldn't have half the fucking problems you have with most Qigongs. It starts off as pure imagination, but most of us don't even get that. We just start to say, move your hands and breathe like this. Well, no, if your imagination isn't engaged, it's just a breathing exercise. You have to have all three. Right? And of the three, the two most important are the breathing and the imagination. You don't have to do a lot of big physical movements to move energy, but there is a mind leading the body component. So your mental body moves first, then your astral body moves, and then your physical body moves like a hand inside a glove. And that's really advanced stuff. But it has to start with imagination. Okay, and so if you understand that progression, and it's based on the amount of absorption you have in the process, not the amount of time you have in the process, then you can progress pretty quickly. But when you start trying to calibrate and start to generate an expectation of how long it should take to get from one level to the next level to the next level, now you're engaging the law of unconscious response, which means the more we try to impose conscious limitations or conscious impetus on an unconscious process, the more we get less response or the inverse of what we want. You see how it all loops back? That's
Sounds
why.
like
Sounds like what?
Like resistance. Like commentators call that like resistance.
Yeah, trying to consciously will yourself to become more in tune with the fire element actually pushes you out of it. So we have to combine, we have to integrate the will and the imagination with the breath and the body and become fully absorbed in the process. And then we'll go through these layers of phenomena, right? I can make myself extremely heavy in an instant. I can go from very, very light to very, very heavy in the blink of an eye. Why? Because I know how to change my elemental vibration, I guess, and I take on those attributes, right? And if you put me on a scale, my physical weight probably wouldn't change. But has anybody here ever seen me do that, where I have somebody, like I oscillate between air and earth? I have somebody pick me up normally, and then I have somebody do the I go air and I get really light and it's easy to pick me up, and then I go earth and you can't pick me up, and then I fuck with them. I go air, and then halfway up while they're trying to lift me, I switch to earth and they drop me, like, and I fucking throw their back out. Joe, did that happen to you? Did I do that to you?
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
What was that like?
It was I couldn't tell if it, looking back, if it was if you're actually heavier, or if it was just my perception of you being heavier, but the effect of it was that I could lift you up. And that's ultimately, that's before.
We could actually, if you really want to get all sciencey about it, we could actually frame that as a mirror neuron response.
Right.
Because what's happening is I'm picking myself up, or in my mind, I'm making myself lighter. My intention is to make myself lighter. Your mirror neurons register that intention, and all of a sudden I'm easier to lift. I change my intention to being heavy. I go into this feeling of being heavy. Your mirror neurons, your proprioceptive nervous system picks up that message and signals heavy, and poof, your body responds. Yeah. It's all pre-conscious, right? The result is the same, right? You can't fucking lift me, right? And I've done this with several people, but this is the idea. But some of you have been in some of our vibrational influence classes where I zap people with the fire element and they break out in a sweat.
Yeah, that also happened to me.
Did I do that to you?
Yeah, Cyrus was there and he started like going back and forth. That's what back and forth, and then Cyrus starts like laughing for some reason. Like, what the hell's going on? And I just like turned bright red.
Yeah. So weird shit happens in the vibrational influence classes, but that's another aspect of the elements. But it's manifestation. But there's levels to it, right? I certainly didn't start there. And unless you're really gifted, which some of you might be, some of you may be better at this than me right out of the gate. Think about it as a progression, purely subjective, and then the body changes, and then the measurable changes happen, and it just keeps going that way. I don't have time to show it today because there's so many things. I may wind up doing an advanced hidden laws of attraction class because I'm looking at all the things on my list. And Ryan asked me to talk about them in the Facebook group, but I'll have to really mull that over. Anyway, I don't know how I got off on this tangent, but think of it that way, Bruce, if that helps. Okay. Let's talk about something really cool. One of the things that let me unpin Joseph, or pin myself rather. For some reason, my default is to just go to whoever was last speaking. It doesn't actually go to me, which is not useful. Squirrels, yeah. You guys are down for the advanced class? No need to wait 7 years this time to share your download with others now. You guys have drained my last drop of blood. All right. Hold on a second. Advanced while I'm catching up. Okay. So let's talk about many of the things that we've been doing have been about clearing shit. So in other words, if we were to think about what we're doing from a persuasion perspective, what we've been working on in terms of the clearing stuff is what we call omega strategies. Omega strategies are tactics and methodologies that remove resistance. They lubricate things. They don't necessarily add more push to the engine. They just resolve the friction it has to fight against. Now, we did add a lot of, we did give you a few push things, manifestation engines that are useful. And a lot of this, and we talked about identity and we've talked about action. I could talk a lot more about the identity prospect, but truthfully, if you really want to get that nailed down, come to Identity by Design, and you will get every single tool that you need, maybe even more than you need, to really hone in on that stuff. If we have time before the end of class, we'll do some of the drills, or I may just install it in you as a byproduct of that. But we'll see where we wind up. We will end with image cycling for sure, because that is definitely something that has to be done. It has to be handled. But there are a class of people, and everything we've talked about goes to working smarter and not harder. But there is a class of people out there that, for some reason, good things just seem to find them. Good things just fall into their lap. I'll tell you, one of the guys, he's a good friend of mine. I've known him for over 20 years, or at least 20, almost 20 years now. And most of you know him. His name is Scott Sandlin. Scott Sandlin is the penultimate lucky person. If a plane were flying overhead and there was a safe carrying $50,000 in the cargo section, and the cargo bay door opened, and the safe fell out and for some mysterious reason opened on the way, the $50,000 would fall into Scott Sandlin's sunroof. Whereas in my world, the safe would fall into my sunroof. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but we've all had those experiences, right? We've all met people that they literally slip on a pile of shit and fall on $100 bill, right? Their job seems to just blow up out of nowhere, and all of a sudden a tremendous opportunity materializes instantaneously. We've all known people like this, and we usually fucking hate them, right? Because they're not us a lot of times. But we've also met people who are literally shit magnets. I call them the schlep rocks of the world. You guys remember the old Pebbles and Bam Bam Flintstones spinoff, where Pebbles and Bam Bam are now all grown up, and one of their friends is Schlep Rock, who is the proverbial Jonah on dry land. It's like anywhere this guy goes, bad luck follows, right? I call it the Schlep Rock factor, right? Wowsy, wowsy, woo, right? There are people in this world who are just shit magnets. If something bad could happen, it's going to happen to them, right? So, and then of course there's that, between these two outliers, you have all the average people. And I got myself, to thinking about this many, many years ago. It's like, how does that work? Is it really just a matter of God blessing us? Is it a matter of God cursing us? Is it really about karma? And certainly karma plays a factor. But a bunch of psychologists and researchers started to ask the same question. Is there something to this idea of luck, of serendipity? And are there traits, are there characteristics that these people have in common? And if so, what are they? Well, it turns out that after quite a bit of research, researchers did in fact discover a series of behavioral traits and attitudes that all lucky people share. And if you have the Identity by Design training, you have all the tools to install those traits. So what we're going to cover now are the traits that you can use to become more automatically lucky. And there's an old saying that I'd rather be lucky than skilled, right? And that's a lot of times luck trumps skill. We would like to have both, arguably. Now, these luck principles that we're going to talk about don't negate or they don't vilify people who work hard. There's a lot of average luck people who work very hard and become very, very successful. And we're not denigrating that. We're not saying don't work hard. We're saying if we combine smart work with these traits, we get more return on our investment, more opportunities, more lemons into lemonade kind of situations. So I want to frame this properly. Okay, some of these will be, first of all, every trait that I'm going to cover, you already have. It's just a question of what is the proportion of that trait to the rest of you. Does that make sense? This means yes, this means no. John, you have okay, good. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. If you take out your manual strategic serendipity, we're going to revisit some things that might seem familiar to you. Yeah, Jinx from Police Academy movies. I don't remember Jinx from the Police Academy movies, but okay. Let me pull up my version here and
David, I don't have a printer to print out this thing, and if I move my screen, it just I'll get kicked out. So
well, don't worry about it. It's in the Facebook group.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be sharing my screen. So just look at it on the screen and make notes, and then when you get a chance, go down and download the manual and play with it. And I created these manuals as Word documents, so you can go in and actually customize it for your own needs. The one I upload, the final version, or at least the first draft of this, when it's completed, will be in a PDF format, and it'll be able to have all the copyrights in it and everything else. But for right now, all you need to do is be able to see the screen, and you'll be fine. Let me just go ahead and focus on this. Okay, screen share. Okay, so there's our old friend, action takers. Lucky people are action takers. But now we're going to drill down to a deeper understanding of what being an action taker actually means. Serendipitous people who are naturally lucky, are more fearless. And when I say fearless, what I mean is they tend to be much more explorational, courageous, curious, and playful about trying new things. They tend to focus on positive potential outcomes. Now let's extrapolate on this. Doesn't mean they move through the world with rose-colored glasses. What it does mean is that instead of worrying about what could go wrong, they first focus on the potentials of a particular situation or opportunity. They say to themselves, I'd like to give it a try. And then they look at the perpetual downsides of what could happen, and then choose to focus on the good outcomes. So it's not that they ignore the potentials of the bad stuff, it's that they're more focused on what they could get from it rather than the bad things that could happen. Okay, so they really minimize that negative side, and they focus on what they're going to get from it rather than what could happen as a byproduct of it screwing up. Okay, very big deal. A lot of people are catastrophe thinkers. They think about all the things that could go wrong and then spend all of their time trying to mitigate the potential for failure. Lucky people, they see the opportunity, they recognize the potential of a situation, they survey the potential ramifications, and then they go back and focus on what good things could happen. Okay, it's really about a focus on the positive outcomes. Now, Psychologically speaking, focusing on good outcomes increases the characteristic of self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency goes right to self-esteem. It goes right to the concept of taking action, of feeling like we're capable of doing things. Okay? It perpetuates and reinforces the belief that you are competent and more capable of accomplishing whatever you set out to do. So this is the tactic, and the understanding is that when you focus on positive outcomes, it actually makes you more competent and capable. Okay, you'll tend to be more of a risk taker. You'll seize opportunities wherever they perceive it, and you're willing to take more risks. That's why we spend a lot of time. If you go back up to here and you notice some of the words, some of the states that we're talking about, these are some of your big four states, aren't they? Right? Especially here, curious and playful. This is why a lot of my students, the longer they stay in Planet David, and again, this is not a shameless plug, it's just a byproduct of the training that you get. Because we spend so much time building states of curiosity and states of playfulness, they tend to raise their vibrations automatically, and their luck potential starts to increase. Okay? It's a byproduct of raising your vibration and of what you choose to think about or think on. Under the concept of action taking, these people, we also want to cover mentally resilient, people who are more playful and curious, people who are lucky action takers, quickly brush off disappointments and move on to the next opportunity. It doesn't mean they're always succeeding. It doesn't mean that they don't feel bad when things go wrong, is they don't dwell on it. They experience it, they get up, they dust themselves off, and they go back to focusing on the next opportunity. They're more fiery. Lucky people tend to be more fiery because that's how a fire person responds. They do something, it doesn't work, they get mad for a few seconds, and then they're up and on to the next opportunity. Wood people dwell on that forever. Okay? Hold on, somebody, you guys need to mute yourselves, please, or I will do it for you. Lucky people in terms of action. Okay, I guess I got to do it for you then. Okay, going back to sharing the screen. Lucky people in general, especially in terms of, once again, this is under the trait of action taking. So you can see there's a few smaller traits or sub-traits in here. They tend to have a happier disposition. Notice the bias towards happy, joyful, playful, content, positive vibration. Okay, happier states. Action takers by nature are happier because they have a constant influx of new stimulations and experiences and activities in their day-to-day lives. They deliberately start doing things that automatically boost contentedness. And in this context, they follow their joy. When they see something that looks like it might be fun, that might have a positive rush for them, they go and they do it. And when you engage in these kinds of states, when you spend a lot of time focusing on the joyful, positive, happy sides of things, you grow more brain cells, you grow more brain matter, which also makes you smarter. And if you think about some of the statistics that I gave you in regards to hostage negotiation and positive, playful attitudes, remember I said people who are more playful and easygoing and competent are 30% more intelligent, 30% more adaptable, 30% more creative, 30% more of every good thing. And their counterparts in the hostage negotiation situations are 30% more compliant. This again goes to this idea that these positive vibrations significantly correlate with better outcomes. Better outcomes, okay? If an opportunity is available, they'll usually follow it. So the minute they see an opportunity, there's a high probability they're going to follow that rabbit hole. They're going to chase that squirrel, so to speak. Okay. Looks like we have somebody in the chat here. Hold on a second. I can't see the chat, so I'll get back to it later. All right. So this is the concept of we got more. Hold on. Also, this is pretty much when we started talking about taking action. This is probably what most people were focusing on. Without belating the obvious, action takers are self-starters. They're big picture thinkers. This is a big one. Lucky people, not hardworking people, lucky people. And it doesn't imply that lucky people aren't hardworking. But these people almost never act with 100% certainty. Now, I'm gonna share an example with you that could come back to haunt me. Let me preface the fact that I have the deepest respect for this person. She is a huge part of my life. She is the mother of my children. But my wife is the most detail-oriented, small picture thinker I have ever met. She is brilliant. She had a PhD in biochemistry before she started chiropractic school. She was a valedictorian of her chiropractic and acupuncture class at the same time. She is not a dumb woman. She is one of the hardest working women I have ever met. Unfortunately, she can also tend to be, she misses a lot of opportunities because of it. So she doesn't generate the kind of luck we're talking about. My wife is so detail oriented that her plans have plans. Okay. And if she cannot see with 100% certainty how to get from A to Z, she won't start. Okay. Now, there are certain occupations, certain jobs where that trait is extremely useful. However, it does not lend itself to luck. It can lend itself to good results, but it doesn't lend itself to the kind of serendipitous experiences or events that we want to attract more of, right? And so when I was going through the Lisa Sasevich training funnel, she had a beautiful expression that she used to say. She used to talk about building the plane while flying it, right? Or an older colloquialism, or another old cliche that many people will recognize is called the ready, fire, aim principle, right? Which explains my life in a nutshell, right? I see something, I start the project, and as I'm doing the project, I'm still completing the project. It's like I start and then I figure it out as I go. And so what happens is I wind up like rushing through, making mistakes, going back, fixing it, and keep moving forward. So if you were to compare and contrast how my wife approaches things versus how I approach things, if we're both starting from the same point, I've made 30,000 mistakes and finished before she's done planning. The difference is when she starts, she'll go straight through. There won't be that many mistakes. You understand? One way results in more mistakes, but you're moving forward faster. The other way results in a lot of preparation time, but less mistakes along the way. Unless, of course, things like, nature intervene and throws you random variables and other human beings who have different agendas and things like that. So I'm very much by the way, I'm a very lucky person. I'm really good at manifesting both positive and negative shit. I've gotten better at the negative shit. I mean, getting rid of it, not doing the negative stuff, but I had to learn how to do that. Also, from what I said earlier, you and she are very different. How is that reconciled? We have a lot of things we have a lot of behavioral traits in common. They're just going in towards different outcomes. And we are at war constantly. Because in a lot of ways we're the same, but sometimes the directions we're going are different. But my wife has certain meta programs because she comes from a science-based and a very aggressive prove your point, prove your data mindset that it indoctrinated her to be very, very sure of all her steps, because any hole in her research, she came from biotech and research, and if there's any flaw in your study structure, they're going to rip you apart. If there's any hole in your data, they're going to rip you apart. And she excelled. She was just so you understand, she was actually a reviewer for other people's articles for a journal. And so she literally has to look for all the flaws. You understand? She has to. That's the world she comes from, and that works amazingly well in the world of research, where your funding lives or dies based on the results and how many times you're published. Right? You get out into the business world, where things are a little bit more fluid. It can hold you back in a lot of ways, right? A lot of the things that work for us or against us are largely context dependent, right? I am better making shit up as I go than most people are planning it out. And I can say that with a little bit of like, oh, that voice in my head saying, oh, there you go, being arrogant again. But I never claim to be humble. But the truth is every time I try to be something other than what I am, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I can create really cool stuff, but my process is not linear by any stretch of the imagination. Whereas my wife's is very linear. 10x everything. Yeah, the bottom line is ready, fire, aim. However much information you have enough to start, and so you do. That's how a lucky person operates for the most part, right? Let me go back to this. So, anyway. So our minds, like our parents, do not always tell the truth. We have confirmation bias. We have loss aversion bias. A lot of things can come up. Remember, I said our unconscious mind makes any potential negative or actual negative experience 6 times worse than it actually is. So if we start looking at all the reasons why we shouldn't do something or the bad things that could happen, our mind tends to blow those way out of proportion. Lucky people, as a rule, tend not to be as much of a slave to that way of thinking. So, when lucky people truly are truly uncertain about a decision, they ask themselves the following questions. They acknowledge the concerns that they have. They don't go into denial. They don't go into rose-colored glasses. They acknowledge that this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, and then they go to the worst case. What's the worst that could happen? And then they ask this question: how likely is that particular situation to really happen? So they weigh the short-term costs versus the long-term benefits. And at the end of the day, they tend to follow their intuition, but they never expect to feel 100% certain 100% of the time. They will have moments of certainty, but they're still going to move forward. So when we think about this whole concept, I can't get it all on one page. Oh well. Of taking action. It's not as cut and dried as people think. There's a little bit more to how lucky people take action as opposed to how some people take action. Is there, you guys have any questions about taking action or action orientation? Okay, you guys ready to, are we unstable again? Okay, no questions, we'll move on.
I have a question,
yes.
real quick. Mm-hmm. So then if you're, for someone whose personality might be more into like very analytical and have to make, these type of plans and can't just think, spur of the moment, I'm just going to do this, I'll figure it out, some way or other, I'll figure it out. So how do you then develop more of that personality to generate more luck in your life?
I'm sorry, ask the question again.
Okay, so if, for example, like your wife or anybody else that might be very analytical, have to really plan, make sure they have plans, the outcome is going to happen, and won't venture forward unless I know that I'm going to end up with this. How do you then generate those other personality type of traits to be more lucky without really altering greatly how you operate in that way?
First of all, you have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable starting without all the information, especially if it goes against your nature, right? Now remember, when we're talking about naturally lucky people, we're not talking about average people. We're not talking about, the bell curve. We're talking about the outliers and the traits that they all have in common. Most of us want to have as much information as possible. Most of us, we just feel that because we're taught into thinking that way. We don't want to have to ad lib and make shit up as we go. We have an allergy to ambiguity, right? And so the workaround that I would give to people who need to and you gotta understand that this need for all the information can range from 75 to 100%. Like, I love my wife and I have the deepest respect for her. I mean, she's forgotten more about Chinese medicine than I'll ever learn. And she's constantly learning more every day. But she's somebody who has to have all of the information before she'll even begin the process. You understand? In a world of very fluid business decisions, that doesn't work well. It leads to missed opportunities, and it leads to people not necessarily wanting to work with you, right? We've lost several business opportunities because she went through everything that was being said with a microscope and then asked even more micro questions, right? Because that's her nature. And in fact, I actually harness that nature. Whenever there's a contract or an agreement or a technical manual that needs to be gone through, I give it to her because she loves that shit. Right? She loves going through all the details and the minutia and getting it all, right? My workaround for people who are what I call paralysis by analysis, right, is figure out how much information you need, subtract 20%. And when you reach that point, start, right? If you want to be even more, move it from 20% to 35%, right? Because a lot of it is fear-based.
Sure.
A lot of it is fear-based. We're afraid that if we don't have all the information, something will go wrong. Lucky people know that shit's going to go wrong, and they'll figure it out as they go. They take it as a given. They're going to have a good outcome. They know they're going to screw up, and they're going to keep going because at the end there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Does that make sense? Not to somebody who needs all the information before they can start, but again, we're not talking about typical thinking, right? We want to understand the psychology of it and the characteristics of it so we can build it in. And that's the whole point of understanding these traits, is we want to use the tools that we've been given to amplify that aspect of our personality, that aspect of our identity, okay? And so on that note, I'm going to kind of jump, I'm going to actually go out of order, and I'm going to talk about one of the other traits that we've actually hit on more and more and more. And this probably is the one I should have led with, but in the manual that I created, we started with action. The next one is identity. This is what's funny, because I didn't believe this when I read it, and then when I taught the class, it was exactly what the research said. Go down to the identity part. Lucky people self-identify as being lucky. When I first read that, I was like, what? And so the first time I taught Get Lucky for Life, it's not what you think, or maybe it is. The first thing that happened is 5 people raised their hand and says, I'm a naturally lucky person. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Before I even taught the traits, people were already volunteering that they were lucky. So, in fact, one of my students, who's a little bit of a flamboyant character, you might have seen it in some of the masterminds, his real name is David. He took this to the ultimate extreme and nicknamed himself Lucky. So anytime he'd introduce himself, he'd go, hi, my name's I'm Lucky, right? But and this is an important piece, they've accepted at an identity level, that they're lucky. They have a belief that supports that, and because they have that belief at that higher level, their emotional refractory period and their perceptual filters shift to bring to parse their environments for more opportunities. Their nervous system, their unconscious mind sorts the elements in that environment that reinforce and take advantage of that label. Therefore, they are far more likely to have fortuitous encounters than those who label themselves average or unlucky. Remember, when somebody says, I am lucky or I am unlucky, that's an identity statement that's held at the belief level, going back to those logical levels of belief. So what you believe ultimately influences what you perceive. Naturally lucky people spontaneously, however they've come to this identity level belief about themselves, they've installed this belief at the identity level, and their neurology follows, everything else follows about it. It generalizes down to their values level, it generalizes down to their deservingness level, it generalizes down to their capabilities level, their behavioral level, and their environmental level. Okay? And then once again, we see our friend here, the chart logical levels of belief, right? If we believe I am a lucky person, then everything lines up. Okay? So let's go back up to extroverted. Now, when we talk about extroverted, we're not talking about the Myers-Briggs form of extroversion. What we're talking about is a conscious decision to seek out more opportunities for social contacts as opposed to opportunities for solitude. The Myers-Briggs definition of extroversion goes to how we recharge our physical and emotional batteries to gain energy. That is not what this form of extroversion means. What this means is that either by virtue of our inner nature being a natural extrovert, or being an introvert who chooses to reach out to people, we actively seek out opportunities for social interaction and engagement. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'll be honest with you, even though I seem like a dyed-in-the-wool extrovert, I am the world's biggest fucking introvert. You know, if it weren't for the news, I wouldn't know there's a quarantine. Because I never leave my fucking house. The only time you see this, this psycho image that I provide is when I'm reaching out, consciously choosing to reach out to people. Otherwise, I'm huddled in a corner somewhere, sucking my thumb. Right? I am very sensitive to I'm very sensitive to my environment. It's kind of one of the drawbacks of my particular psychology and physiognomy. There's levels of sensitivity that I have that other people don't, and that's a double-edged sword. Means I'm very much at the mercy of the environments I'm in, and a lot of you are very similar. You seek out moments where you can be with your thoughts, with your books. If you're a gamer or whatever it is that you do, but that's not the point. That's just how you recharge your batteries. Okay. Lucky people consciously, deliberately seek out ways to expand their social networks. They're not real concerned about the intimacy of those networks. See, introverts, when they meet someone, first of all, most introverts can count the number of friends they have on one hand and have fingers left over. Okay, because intimacy and connection is something we cultivate with a few select individuals. Our world is very personal to us. Lucky people reach out. They connect and have feelers everywhere, right? And that was something that I had to learn to do. extroverted people, either conscious extroverts or unconscious extroverts, do not wait for people to come to them, which is a character trait a lot of introverts have, and why a lot of them feel rejected, not good enough, unworthy, or ostracized by the people around them. It's because unless someone literally comes up to you, looks you in the eye and says, would you like to do this? You automatically assume you're not welcome. Okay? It's a very, very, very common phenomenon amongst introverts. Okay? And it's projection. And it's a double-edged sword for us as introverts, because the body language of shyness is almost the same body language as snobbishness. You guys remember what I said about controlling the narrative? When someone looks at you, especially in a socially engaging environment, and they see someone who's aloof and separated and not interacting with people, they don't automatically assume you're shy. They don't. And especially if you're giving off language that signals defensiveness or discomfort, you send the message of being unapproachable, because they feel those feelings when they look at you, and they're looking at you and they feel those feelings, they assume you're the cause. And so they avoid you. And they frame you in their mind of not being approachable, of being a snob, when in truth you're dying for someone to come and talk to you. But you won't initiate, because if you're not asked, you're not welcome. Not true. But there's a tendency for introverts to think that way. That, and we find a lot of social interaction with people who we don't have a lot in common with, to be energetically taxing. Okay? We bond. One of the reasons so many of us bond here is because everyone you're in this class with is a kindred spirit. Right? When you're here, you're amongst family, you're amongst your tribe, because everything you want to talk about, everything you're interested in is mirrored by the people around you. And when you're out in the world, you're like a wizard or a wise woman wandering in the darkness, afraid of being burned at the stake or judged for being weird or unconventional or what have you. Right? Here you can drop all that and be the person you truly want to be and aspire and are. Right? My purpose, my goal for you is to be walking your truth no matter where you are. But it will always be easier here, because we're all the same. In our amazing ways of being different, we all come from that desire to study and understand and be together. Does that make sense? Those things aside, though, if you want to generate more opportunities, personally, professionally, socially, romantically, you must intentionally extrovert yourself. You must reach out. That does not mean they have to be intimate connections, although some of them will be. Most of them will be very casual, almost and completely superficial. They may be no more than a Facebook friending of someone you've never met. I can't tell you how my life changed the minute I chose to do the thing that was uncomfortable. Not because I liked it, but because there was a result I wanted, and what I was doing wasn't getting it. And this is where we run into a conundrum many times, because there's this concept of, just be yourself, except we don't actually know who that is. We have the self that other people want us to be, and we have the self that we would like to be, and the truth is neither of those. A self is just a mask. And so here's my solution to that. Be the person who makes you feel good about yourself and the person who gets the result that they want. And many times, in order to get the result that you want, you have to change an aspect of yourself. Okay? So there's always a balance. When I'll tell you, I'll tell you the tipping point for me, and see if and maybe you can relate to this, and maybe you can't. I was actually quite successful in my own way from my late 20s up through my early 30s, but I had never gone to college. And I kept hitting walls. I kept hitting barriers that I couldn't seem to get past. And then one day, the woman I was living with, bless her heart, literally drugged me by the ear into the registrar's office of Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City campus, and made me register. I was terrified because very early in my life, when I was just getting out of high school or getting ready to go to college, I went to a college. I had those pre-college interviews to see if there's something that you want to go to attend that college. And my aspirations at that time were to be a professional actor. And Allentown College of St. Francis de Sales, it's now DeSales College, had one of the best theater companies or departments in the country. And they were literally 3 miles from my house, 5 miles from my house. And I walked in and I sat down in front of Father Schubert, who proceeded to list all the reasons why I wasn't good enough to be an actor. Only the effect that he had on me didn't stop there. I came away from that thinking I wasn't even good enough for college. And so I didn't go to college until I was 33 years old, because I was afraid I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't talented enough. I wasn't enough. But at the same time, I wanted to compensate. I looked for ways to compensate for that lack that I felt I had. And so I acquired black belts and certifications in neuro-linguistic programming and certification this, certification that, and I list them on my resume and all these other things. And it still wasn't enough. And so when this wonderful woman, who I blame her for and I credit her for to this day, drugged me into that registrar's office, I had no idea what my life was going to be like. But I made a decision, and there were two pivotal moments for me in my academic career that made all the difference in the world. One was that moment of going in and taking those steps, even though I was convinced, up to that point at least, I was convinced I wasn't smart enough. Okay. But I took the steps anyway. I didn't have the confidence, but I had the relentlessness. And so I went through I took that first step. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know how I was going to do. I didn't know what the end result would be. And I walked into one of my very first classes was sociology. And my instructor's name was an African-American gentleman by the name of Sim Swindle. And to this day, I love the guy because he would give you open book tests. He knew the system was rigged. But he did something very, very profound that flipped my whole world on its ear. He looked at the class and he said, each and every one of you are beginning this class with an A. How many of you are going to maintain it? And I was like, there's an idea. Because most of us think that we come in with 0 and we have to work up to an A. But we all know it's harder to get something than it is to maintain something. Mm. Unless you're talking about my weight, but that's a different issue for a different day, right? And so I was like, whoa, it was just one of those those weird words, weird statements that just changes everything. Like a reframe, right? And I was like, well, wait a minute. I already got a 4.0 in every class right now. All I got to do is keep it. So I did. And I aced every single class. By the end of the first or second term, I forget if it was 1 or 2, I got an invitation from Phi Theta Kappa, which is the honor society for 2-year colleges. And all of a sudden, poof. Now, I've told lots of my Phi Theta Kappa stories, all right? And that was there was a pivotal moment there, too. Because up until that moment, I was never a joiner. I wasn't involved in any clubs in high school. I wasn't involved in anything other than acting. And it wasn't a club. It was just the school plays and the school musicals. That was the only club that I ever, or activity I was ever involved in. In fact, I was voted the top actor in my high school. And then I encountered a man with a collar who said I wasn't good enough. And all of a sudden, poof, right? You will encounter people who will try to squash your dreams. Remember, it's your dream, not theirs. Take the steps anyway. But when we had a meeting and it was time for people to, first of all, I had to make a decision. Did I want to join a club or not? The second one is, did I want to run for an election or run for an office? And that's when the moment of decision came. And the conscious thing that I'm sharing with you now happened to me. I realized that if I wanted the next 33, 66, 136 years of my life to be different, I had to do something different. And so I did. As uncomfortable as it was, as stressful as it was, as how much not me it was, I did the uncomfortable thing. And the rest is history. I reached out. I didn't wait to be asked. Although that happens a lot in Phi Theta Kappa. You get asked to do a lot of shit. But you have to take that first step. You've got to reach out. And this is of all the traits that I think are misunderstood when it comes to generating luck, this one is the big one. You can't wait for it to come to you. Here's what I mean. Reach out to people just for the sake of reaching out to people, without any other agenda than making connections. And things will happen. And so many things, the reasons you're here, happen because of deliberate reaching out to random people and being extroverted. And I am not. But every single one of you here are here as a byproduct and a result of that extroversion. Okay? So maybe you can find relevance. Maybe you can find relevance in that story. Maybe you can't. But I will tell you, I spent a lot of years being lonely, and I didn't have to be. Of feeling not good enough, and I didn't have to be, because nobody taught me. Nobody explained to me what I've explained to you. And once I learned this piece, my luck changed dramatically. Dramatically. Okay? So please take that for what it's worth. Okay? Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay. Let's explore this idea of deliberate extroversion. Does somebody have a comment or something they want to share? Yes, no?
David.
Uh-huh.
You should be able to hear me more clearly because I'm on phone now versus internet audio. A little easier. So I just wanted to share with you, you were talking about people being in David land or David world when they have that feeling of playfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, during our little last break, happen to live in an area where it's kind of all touristy. Outside my door is like restaurants and live music. I'm living in a cool spot in Delray Beach.
Sounds like fun. By the way, I spent 9 years in Coral Springs, so I'm intimately familiar with Delray Beach.
Yeah, so it's really become even more of an international high. It's just such a great place, connected to the beach, to the trees. It was tropical here. It's just so beautiful. Anyway, so I kind of have that attitude of being, I always say, be playful, not be childlike, not childish.
Yes.
Because of everything we're saying, and I was thinking about that funnel,
mm-hmm.
you know, where you're listing people's values, you're controlling your own state, you're getting immediately in rapport, you're eliciting their values, you're using your language and you're tapping into their mindset, and then you're linking it to yourself. Well, that whole time I was such in a highly playful state, just driving around on my bicycle,
mm-hmm.
just but in a nuanced, quiet way, not like ridiculous.
Sure.
To myself, it was so, I've never felt in such a high vibrational state like that before, ever. To the point where people were recognizing it like down the block, and people just smiling. It was the kind of like really high. I was just in a very playful state, and I stopped at a couple music places and just connected. Immediately went into rapport with the entire band, then connected with the whole entire place. It was quite an interesting experience.
Mm-hmm. Like I said,
and some of your words were ringing in my ears, so that was all good. I was in like obviously a
you got David Mind virus,
huh?
You got the David Mind virus.
Yes, that's something like that, David.
you know you're making an impact when pictures of you with memes on them start reaching your Facebook page. But excellent, and yes, and this is why we keep coming back to this idea of playfulness. And
so that was fun. Lucky, because this is never.
Yeah. Again, and sometimes we have to cultivate that. But if we cultivate joyful, playful states and then we never reach out, well, by default, more people will tend to approach us, but we'll never really tap into the power of deliberate extroversion. You know what I'm saying? Right? And there's tremendous benefits to it. I mean, I still remember that day so vividly. It's like it was literally, if I want the next 30 years to be different than the first 30, I have to be different. And what I mean by different is I have to do something different and evaluate the result it produces. And so I judge things now very, very much by the result it produces. So at the risk of sending us off in a very different direction and opening up a whole can of worms that may piss people off, this idea of if you just be yourself, you'll attract certain types of people into your life. Horseshit. If you want to attract certain types of people into your life, you must first become the person to whom those type of people are attracted to. And anybody who tells you different is trying to keep you stuck or sell you a product. It doesn't mean you're not good enough, by the way. What it means is what you're doing with your mind and your body and your behaviors is not attracting the result that you want. It has nothing to do with value and everything to do with actions. Does that make sense? Eliminate the tendency to assign value to the actions personal worth to the actions you take and the behaviors that they generate in other people. Be self-aware enough to realize everybody is self-centered. Everybody is looking for themselves, always. And be aware enough and evolved enough to become the person they're looking to recognize. And then make a decision if being that kind of person is who you want to be. You get it? You get what I'm saying? Okay. You have to adapt to the situation, right? I judge things by the results they produce and how I feel about myself inside in terms of being in integrity with myself when I do them. And again, it's all in harmony with the outcomes I set. So, okay, let me jump back to our luck stuff. Going back to extroversion, let's kind of flesh this out. Deliberate extroversion. These people tend to have a much more outgoing personality. Now, outgoing personalities can be cultivated because personalities are constructs. They're habits of behavior and thought. They tend to seek out more opportunities for social contacts as opposed to opportunities for solitude. They reach out to the world, so the world reaches out to them. This is a big deal, guys. You got to go first. You can't wait to be asked. You got to go first. Okay? A lucky person's direction of attention is external associated. They're out in the world engaging. Okay? Doesn't mean that when they want to recharge, they can't hide in their rooms and suck their thumbs or, get engrossed in a book. But they make reaching out a deliberate, intentional act. Okay? This is especially true if you're naturally introverted like me. An average or unlucky people's directions of attention. Hold on a second. Somebody need to be muted, or was that somebody asking a question? Okay. Okay. The average person is, when we talk about 3 magic questions, you have 4 basic attributes to the thought processes at any given moment. You can be internal or external. You can be associated or dissociated. Most people are zoning through the world internal, dissociated. Lucky people, by default, tend to be more externally focused and interactive. And so the world engages with them. And that's, again, pulls more opportunities for positive connections, collaboration, joint ventures, dates, relationships, party invitations, the full spectrum of social engagement. But if you don't interact, you don't get the goodies, okay? So they tend to have larger circles of friends and acquaintances, and this increases their chances of fortuitous referrals and opportunities. Think about Facebook for a moment. How many of you heard about an opportunity or an event or a movement from somebody who you've never actually met except for a casual Facebook friending or a following? That's what I'm talking about. These weren't deep relationships, but because those channels were open, things came to you that couldn't have come to you any other way. So extroversion is about deliberate reaching out and creating connections to people. And what happens is people who are naturally extroverted or people who are serendipitously extroverted, they tend to unconsciously zero in on these elements. They just know that for some reason this is something important to do, so they do it. Once again, a lot of what NLP was derived from was the idea of observing people who were naturals at their particular craft or skill set, finding out what they do that they didn't know that they did, and turning it into a model. And that's what we're doing here. Lucky people unconsciously zero in on these extroversion opportunities, and they benefit from that. You are learning the model of luck, the model of serendipity, and so you must, because you're learning a model, you must go through the 4 stages of learning and achieve an unconscious competence level in your ability to zero in on extroversion opportunities. You understand there's 4 stages of learning. There's unconscious incompetence. You didn't know what you didn't know. And then you became conscious of your incompetence. You discovered there was something you didn't know, something you couldn't do, and you made the opportunity, you saw the information and made a conscious decision to learn it, and that moved you to level 3, conscious competence. The understanding of the theory, the principle, the technique, and getting enough practice in it so that when you think about it, you can do it. And then, of course, level 4, after doing it enough times, it becomes relegated to an unconscious level of proficiency, just like walking or breathing, and now you're unconsciously competent. People who are natural lucky people are unconsciously competent at zeroing in on these opportunities for extroversion. Okay? We have to go through the learning stages, okay? Which means it will feel weird. It will feel unnatural, but just like the echo technique, You'll feel obvious, but you will be the only one who feels that way. Okay? Lucky people will perceive and act upon chance encounters in the environment that unlucky people will not. Unlucky people will not do this. Okay?